All right. The computer says we're live, so I guess we're live. It's Panther-Lair Post-Game Show after Pitt loses to Notre Dame 37-15 at Acrisure Stadium today. All the hype, all the build-up, all the hoopla, as they say, as the kids say, although I don't think kids say hoopla, but all of it build up to a great atmosphere, a great scene on the north side, in the North Shore. Pretty much everything you would want out of a college football game day, including having college game day there, but did not deliver in the game, and Pitt got blown out by 22 points. And really, it wasn't even 22 points. I mean, Eli Holstein throws a 21-yard touchdown pass to Malachi Thomas at the end. Pitt calls a timeout with 6 seconds left while trailing 37-9, and they throw a 21-yard touchdown pass to Malachi Thomas. Shout out to Malachi Thomas for getting his touchdown, finally getting on the field. Wasn't on the field on offense at all until that final possession. Eli Holstein gets on the field, and they get a touchdown. So shout out to that. It ends up being a 22-point loss as opposed to a 28-point loss. And ultimately, it doesn't matter whether you lose by 1, 28, or 22. Pitt got blown out in this game. They were outclassed, outplayed, outcoached, out everything that you could possibly be. And they go home with a loss, or they stay home with a loss. Notre Dame goes back to South Bend with a victory. Notre Dame improves to 8-2. They'll probably move up in the poll. I haven't looked around the rest of the top 10. Sometimes on game days like this, kind of get sucked into the Pitt game and don't really pay much attention. Just sort of right before I started just now, I was kind of catching up on a couple of things. I saw Boston College just barely lost to Georgia Tech, 36-34. Have to look into that game and kind of see what happened with that one. But I don't know what happened around the rest of the top 10. So maybe Notre Dame moves up, maybe they don't, but they just went on the road and beat what was a ranked team by 22 points. That's got to be worth something to the voters. Pitt goes back to the South Side at 7-3 overall, still 5-1 in the ACC with 2 games left to play in conference. And of course, we'll talk a lot about that and what's on the table for Pitt and all of those things as we move through the week. And certainly as we move through the next hour or so here on the live Panther-Lair Post-Game Show. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, go over to the website Panther-Lair.com. We've got a lot of coverage from the game. We're getting some recruit reactions because Pitt had a lot of recruits there. And while you can't imagine that they liked what they saw on the field, I do think, today was a good showcase for the stadium, a good showcase for the fan base, who will undoubtedly rip their support back as quickly as they, with quickness equal to the reluctance with which they offered it in the first place. But nevertheless, they got to see the stadium at full capacity, got to see what it's like. It got pretty loud during Kavir Baines-Marquez's interception return. Not really sure it got very loud at any other point during that game, but it did then. And so they at least could see the potential of Acrisure Stadium when Pitt is playing well and playing big games. But it might be a little while before we see that again. Although, who knows? They go to Georgia Tech next week and pull off the win, what would likely be an upset. I'm assuming Georgia Tech will be the betting favorite. Then maybe the Miami game carries a little extra juice, although I think that'll be the Saturday after Thanksgiving, right? So maybe not. Either way, we've got recruit reactions on Panther-Lair.com and a lot of other coverage from the game, so make sure you go check it out, Panther-Lair.com. I mean, of course, we're going to have our shot of the game. I'm going to open the beer now, though, because I'm a little thirsty. And it's never too early, right? I'm sure a lot of you have been going a lot longer than I have. That's my first one of the day. So I'm trying to catch up with you guys who are out there bright and early, getting ready for this game. I mean, look, we started right off the bat. I mean, it was a great atmosphere. It was a great setting. It was everything you would want college football to be. It was, it was great in all those ways you want a college football game to be great. It just did not deliver on the field. And the reality is it kind of didn't deliver right from the start. I mean, this game felt lost right off the jump. I mean, honestly, Pitt, it was, let me see how many plays it was. 1, 2, 3, the fourth play of the game. First play, Mason Heichel throws to Desmond Reed. He makes a guy miss and gets 19 yards because that's what he does. Second play, Desmond Reed runs for 5 yards. Third play, Heichel hits Justin Holmes for a 12-yard gain. They're chipping away. They're moving the ball down the field. They're in Notre Dame territory. 1st and 10 from the 39. They drop back. Raphael Williams has a step on 2 guys. He beats the coverage. He's open, and the ball is there. And he gets dropped. And I think the entire stadium said, oh, no. Next play is a shovel pass to Desmond Reed. It gets 2 yards. Third one, the next play after that, the 3rd and 8 to Blue Hicks. Ball hits him in the hands. He gets crushed. Like, it's laid out. Like, I can't fault Blue Hicks for not catching that, but the ball hit him in his hands. And then they go for it on 4th and 8. Mason Heichel gets sacked. And it pretty much never got better after that. It pretty much never got better after Mason Heichel threw to Justin Holmes for a 12-yard gain on 3rd down, on the 3rd play of the game. It was pretty much all downhill from there. And like, I'm not going to sit here and say, wow, the game is totally different if Raphael Williams catches that pass. But the reality is, and I think we all knew it going into the game, and I think when he dropped that pass, it hit everyone. It hit me. I'm sure it hit you. It hit those of us in the press box. It was like, you can't waste that opportunity. Like, if you want to have a chance to win this game, if you want to have a chance to beat Notre Dame, when the ball hits your hands, you have to catch it. You cannot drop that pass. That's a 1st down. Who knows if he had a step on the defenders, maybe he's able to run even a little bit further. You can't drop that pass. There was no margin for error in a game like this, where they do have more talent on the other side. And whatever Pitt wants to say, Pitt's players should be confident and believe in themselves, and certainly so should the coaches. But Notre Dame is a more talented team than Pitt. And I think we all knew that and acknowledged it and said it before the game even started. But like, when you're playing a more talented team, you cannot afford to drop a pass like that, because you just don't have any room for that kind of mistake. And it just got worse. And I mean, they stopped Notre Dame. They force them into a field goal that their kicker misses. And then Pitt goes 3 and out. And then they give up the 56-yard touchdown run. And when that 56-yard touchdown run from Jeremiah Love was followed with a pick 6 to make it 14-0, I think out of 68,000, let's see what they officially announced the attendance at. I have my game book here. They officially announced the attendance at 68,400. Exactly. Wow. Isn't that amazing? Exactly 68,400 people there. It's a statistical anomaly. But I would say after that pick 6, out of 68,400 people, if you polled them, no fewer than 63,000 would tell you this game is over. I felt it. You felt it. There was no way Pitt was going to come back against this team. They just weren't. And like, we saw enough on those first, I mean, it was ultimately counted as 5 drives, but I mean, the last 2 of those drives were 1 play each, a 56-yard touchdown run by Jeremiah Love and a 49-yard pick 6 on an interception off Mason Heichel. And after those 5 possessions, everybody in the building knew it. Knew the talent gap was too significant and too severe for Pitt to come back. Pitt was going to need everything to go its way to win this game. And not only did everything not go their way, they made some crucial mistakes that came back to bite them. Whether it was that interception, whether it was drop passes, whether it's penalties. Listen, if you're going to jump off sides, all right, and they snap the ball, hit the quarterback. Don't let him get off his free play pass. Do something. Do something to make sure he can't just, heave it up for a prayer. He's willing to take the 5 yards because you already jumped offside and drew the flag. So he's willing to take the 5 yards. He's going to throw one down there and see if his guys can make a play. Well, they did make plays every single time, or both times. Pitt was officially called for 5 penalties. I believe they had 2 offsides penalties declined because CJ Carr made 2 big throws. Malachi Fields, I think Fields might have caught both of them. He's always like, he's really good. And like, this is the thing. Notre Dame was better up front on both sides of the ball. They had the best running back in the game. They had the best wide receiver in the game. And, I'm not smart enough to sit there and talk about the linebackers or the DBs, but I'm guessing they had some of the best at those positions too. Notre Dame is better than Pitt. Notre Dame's a more talented team than Pitt. And inferior talent can beat superior talent. It has happened. It's totally plausible. It happens multiple times every week in college football. But it's not going to happen when you shoot yourself in the foot the way Pitt did. It's not going to, and this isn't, Pitt could have beat them, but this is not one of these things like Pat Narduzzi has been saying all year, nobody beat us, we beat ourselves. No, that wasn't the case today. Notre Dame beat Pitt solidly and resoundingly. What I'm saying is any chance Pitt had was going to hinge on them not making mistakes. And they made it right off the bat. Dropped passes on the first drive. Mason on the second drive, Mason Heinchel runs out of bounds for a 2-yard sack and almost throws a pick on third down. Third drive, right after that, they give up the 56-yard touchdown run. So there's a mistake. And then right after that, you have an interception. And again, by that point, I don't think anybody thought Pitt had a chance. Maybe the players. I hope the players. But I didn't. You didn't. I think we all knew it's kind of done. Here's maybe, hold on. Maybe we should do the shot of the game before I start on this rant, because this is my biggest takeaway from the game. All right. So I think the shot of the game will be appropriate before we start the biggest rant of the game. And it's not really a rant. It's sort of a resigned, just kind of observation. And it's funny, like after the game, as we were riding the elevator down to the post-game press conference, I forget who said it. Somebody among the local Pittsburgh media was like, just don't really need this to be that long of a press conference. I know what happened. We saw the game. We all watched the game. Not really sure what much there is to ask about. And I mean, that's true. Like, this was a game that was very cut and dry, very clear. One team was pretty considerably better than the other, and the game played out as such. And it doesn't always go that way. I think last week Notre Dame beat Boston College 25-10. I think that game was like really close at halftime. Never really. I think Jeremiah Love had like a 94-yard touchdown run late in the fourth quarter that ultimately made it 25-10. But it was a one-score game prior to that. So superior talent isn't always going to blow out inferior talent. And we've seen Pitt have games that are close, even though they were out talented. We've seen Pitt win games, even though they had the lesser talent. And we've seen Pitt lose games to teams with inferior talent. So it's not a, be all end all. But this game more or less played out probably the way that talent dictated. And it didn't really go against type at all in that regard. But shot of the game, I can't really sit here and say there's an individual player. I mean, Rasheem Biles obviously had the pick 6. He had 9 tackles. That was a game high. Kavir Baines-Marquez started, played every snap. He had 8 tackles. There were a lot of guys on defense. I mean, basically all 3 linebackers and the 2 safeties. So Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles, Braylon Lovelace, Javon McIntyre, Kavir Baines-Marquez played every single snap. Shout out to those guys for grinding through it. But I still, and we'll talk about whether the defense was really to blame in this game or what level of blame the defense shoulders. We'll get to that in a second. I'll give the shot of the game, honestly, to the Pitt fans. I give you guys a hard time sometimes. I don't always respect you or give a lot of respect. I think sometimes Pitt fans complain more than, their level of complaining surpasses their level of effort or investment. But I will say, you showed up today. You look great on College game day. The crowd looked awesome. The parking lots looked awesome. It was a proper college football Saturday on the North Shore. Game results notwithstanding, you guys showed up. You did your part. I understand if you got discouraged, before the first quarter was even over. I'm right there with you. But everything up until kickoff, man, the fans did the job. And so shout out to you guys. Backshore Apparel shot of the game goes to the fans because they showed up today. They were ready to play. Yeah, we might have more of those. Don't forget, Backshore Apparel shot of the game. It's brought to you by Backshore. Backshore is born in Pittsburgh, but built on the Tampa coast. It's designed for days by the water and salt in the air, but it didn't stop there. Today, Backshore hats are built for every season and every forecast, whether you're chasing waves, hitting the trail, putting for birdie or bogey, or braving the Pittsburgh cold. Wherever life takes you, Backshore has you covered. Explore the collection at backshoreapparel.com. Backshore, coastal roots, all weather ready. And our friend Mike runs Backshore, big Pitt fan, big supporter of Panther-Lair.com. He's been supporting the podcast for years. He's the man. He's got great stuff. I got a Backshore hat I wear all the time. Go check it out, backshoreapparel.com. All right, here's the thing, okay? All week, I've wrestled with the idea, the concept of what this game means. And we've talked about it on the Morning Pit. We talked about it on the live stream. We talked about it with Pat Narduzzi's comments on Monday about, I'd gladly get beat 110-10 if it means we win the next two. All these things. We had all these conversations about what this Notre Dame game meant or what it was going to mean and what it could potentially mean. And I think where I settled, and I settled on this driving to the game this morning. And I thought about how I was going to write about it in these terms, and that I would talk about it in these terms on the live stream, because these terms apply win or lose. Okay. That this game against Notre Dame. Now, before you fire off angry comments, listen to the whole statement. This game against Notre Dame means nothing. The ACC race, it's still out there. Georgia Tech and Miami, those are the games that will determine who goes to the ACC championship game. Pitt's fate is in its hands to a certain extent. If they win out, they've got probably a really good chance of making it to the ACC championship game, tiebreakers notwithstanding. They can get there. And in that sense, in the sense of getting to the college football playoff through the ACC championship game, which is probably going to be Pitt's most likely path in any given year, this game against Notre Dame means nothing. Also, this game against Notre Dame means everything. This game truly did. It meant nothing, and it meant everything. It meant nothing in terms of the ACC race, and it meant everything in terms of where this program stacks up in college football 2025. It's not about where Pitt is as a program, actually, I shouldn't even say where this program stacks up in 2025. It's where this team stacks up in 2025. It's not about where Pitt is as a program or where Narduzzi has gotten them or this or that. It's about in 2025 college football season, where is Pitt? Where do they belong? Top 10, top 20, top 30, top 40. Where is their spot on the pecking order? And I said when Pitt showed up in the initial college football playoff rankings 2 weeks ago, I said the college football playoff selection committee was giving Pitt a chance. When they ranked them number 24, they were giving them a shot to win these 3 games and climb into the at-large conversation. And so that the ACC championship game would not be relevant. They were giving them an opportunity. But they came into this game needing to make a statement. And this is what I was thinking as I was driving to the game. This is a game where Pitt will have an opportunity to make a statement. And I got that wrong. I got it wrong. They didn't have an opportunity to make a statement. One way or the other, win or lose, whether they want to or not, this game would make a statement. It would make a statement about where Pitt fits in college football hierarchy for the 2025 season. And what we found, what we learned from this game is that the 2025 Pitt football team is not at that level. And did we probably assume that was the case? Yeah. But today's game was an opportunity to say, no, they do belong in the top 15. Because I think if they had won this game, and I think if they had won convincingly, they would climb. They would climb into the top 20 and potentially even into the top 15. I think it was that big of an opportunity. I think this, beating a top 10 team gives you the opportunity to climb 5 spots, 10 spots. Maybe 10's a bit much, but maybe 7 spots. And that would get them into the top 15, which would mean that beating 2 more ranked opponents in the final 2 weeks would put you in that at-large conversation. That was the statement they could make today. That was the opportunity they had today to make a statement about where they are and where they belong. But the thing is, it wasn't just an opportunity to make a statement. This game was going to make a statement, and the statement it made is not the statement Pitt wanted to make. Rasheem Biles said after the game, EGK is their thing. Everybody's going to know. Everybody's going to know. This is one of their like slogans for 2025. They've been saying it. Everybody's going to know. Like everybody's going to know about us. Everybody's going to know, who we are. Well, yeah. Everybody does know. Everybody does know about Pitt now. Everybody does know who Pitt is. And whoever Pitt is, and whoever they end up being, whether they end up being 7-5, 8-4, 9-3, whatever comes to these final two games, they have made the statement that they're not in that upper tier and that they're probably not at the high end of the next tier. That was the statement they can make today. That was the statement they did make today by just being outclassed, out-talented, outplayed, out-coached, out-everythinged by Notre Dame. That they're not in that group. They're not in that conversation. That doesn't mean they can't go out and beat Georgia Tech or beat Miami. It doesn't mean that all hope is lost for the season. It doesn't mean that they can't still achieve some of those goals. It just means that they are where they are. And I said this on Twitter during the game that, I think a couple things can be true. Like one is that, they the goal of potentially getting to the ACC championship game, playing for the ACC championship, that goal is still out there. It's still very much on the table. But what they lost today was the opportunity to establish themselves as something more than just being an ACC title contender. And there's nothing wrong with contending for the championship of your conference. But there's a level above that I think Pitt wanted to reach. And it's a level that I think Georgia Tech wanted to reach. It's a level that Miami wanted to reach. And a level Virginia wanted to reach, or Louisville. And these teams have one by one blown their opportunities. And for Pitt, today was that opportunity. That even if they go out and beat Georgia Tech and Miami, they will be at best an ACC title contender. Nothing more. Because today, when they had the opportunity to show that they were something more than an ACC title contender, they failed. They failed miserably. I said spectacularly. I don't think they failed spectacularly. They got blown out. All right, I want to get some chats, get some of your comments and questions here. Royce Beacom is a super chatter twice. I got to find your comments though. Listen, remember, if you want to be a super chatter, make sure you put your comments and your questions with your super chat. Let me scroll through here, see if I can find Royce's comment because he was the first one. Here we go. The obvious advantage for Notre Dame was the open field tackling, particularly along the sidelines. Pitt consistently lost tackles in that situation. I think the obvious advantage for Notre Dame was up front. It was the offensive line and defensive line. They were just too big, too strong, too athletic. Every Pitt offensive drop back to pass or handoff or whatever it is, Notre Dame was swarming. They were in there. Conversely, every time Notre Dame handed the ball off, it seemed like there was like not only did it seem like they were blowing Pitt off the ball, but they were creating enough space for Love to take his time and be patient and find the running holes. And that's why he averaged more than 6 yards per carry. And yeah, he had the 56-yard carry, but he also had let's do the math here. He finished with 147 on 23 carries. So he had 56 on one carry. That would be 99 on 22 carries. That's still a really good day. It's still better than 4 yards per carry. And he was consistently breaking off those runs, consistently picking up chunks because of that advantage up front. And there wasn't really anything Pitt could do to counter that. Because I think the more you sacrifice to try to stop the run or try to counter the advantage that the other team has with their offensive line, the more you're, making yourself exposed on the back end. And you're already pretty exposed on the back end. They give a bunch of plays to the tight end on the one drive. Malachi Fields had a great game, 7 for 99 and 2 touchdowns. The tight end caught 6 for 67. There was no way to really counter that. When you have that kind of disadvantage in the line at the line of scrimmage, there's not a lot you can do about it. And I think that was where the biggest difference was. Like, Jeremiah Love is awesome. Malachi Fields is really good. Eli Raridan, really good. Like those guys are really good players. But the difference in the line on both lines, offensive line, defensive line for both teams, that to me was the difference in the game. And that was something that Pitt couldn't overcome, and there wasn't really a way they could overcome it. Super chatter John Waffle H2P says Narduzzi is a liability. Time to move on. Well, you know, like there's a larger conversation to have about coaching stability, what you want out of the program, what you expect out of the program, where the program should be, where it is, where it's going. I like you can make a case that, all right, so the team was spiraling, right? The team was headed toward a really bad outcome, and he made the difficult decision to bench a quarterback who won a lot of games for him last year, and that decision manifested in 5 wins in a row, turning a 2-2 season into a 7-2 season. And they came back to reality. They crashed into the ground against a really talented team. And maybe they'll finish 7-5. Maybe they'll finish 8-4. Maybe they'll finish 9-3. I don't know. But with a true freshman quarterback who could be and should be the foundation of what you do going forward, So, we got the statement today that clearly Pitt is not at that level. But I think we've also seen Pitt establish over the past 5 games that they're not at the bottom of the ACC either. And I would say not even in the middle of I would say they're upper third of the ACC right now, which is not a bad place to be, particularly when you're doing it and you got there with a true freshman quarterback. And dealing with a lot of considerable injuries. And I don't really default to the injury, excuse because everybody's got injuries and everything like that. I could sit there and be like, oh, they missed Rasheem Biles for 3 games, and Kyle Lewis missed a game, and Cruz Brookins missed a bunch of games, and Des Reed and all this stuff. But everybody's dealt with that. I don't want to make those excuses, but I can't sit back and say, oh, they got blown out today because Pat Narduzzi's a liability. They got blown out today because Notre Dame has better talent up front. Really, if you want to make it a 1-sentence thing, is because Notre Dame has better talent up front. John Waffle follows up as a super chatter and says, Notre Dame will keep coming in, stealing talent. We could have used this as a massive recruiting tool, but Narduzzi didn't give a damn. Fire Narduzzi. Are you saying he didn't give a damn about this game? I don't think that's the case. Look, we're not going to relitigate that quote from Monday. I think he misspoke. I don't think it's what he meant to say. I think it was, poorly worded. I think the sentiment was understood, but it was just executed completely, terribly. The players wanted to win. Coaches wanted to win. Narduzzi wanted to. They knew what was at stake here. They knew what statement they could have made. They knew that, this whole everybody's going to know. Like that was EGK, right? That's their slogan. That's their mantra. And today was the day to show everybody what you can do. And they knew what was in front of them. They knew the opportunity was there. And they know they blew it. Bill Florian says, worst game I've been to since the 2009 Cincinnati game. Disappointing. Really? Come on, man. That's like 16 years ago. That's the worst game you've been to? Have you not gone to any games since then, Bill? Come on. Worse games than this. Shoot, the last time Notre Dame was here was a worse game than that. You probably didn't go to it, right? It was a COVID game. They couldn't have anybody in the stands. That was a worse game than that. That was like 45-3 or something there, 45-7 or something like that. It was terrible. That was a worse game than this. The Oklahoma State game in 2017 was a worse game than this. The Penn State game in 2018 was a worse game than this. Paul Chris lost to Akron at home in 2014. That was a worse game than this. Let me think. Oh, you're just talking about, like you said, since the 2009 Cincinnati game, there was like the next year, there was West Virginia, Miami, and was there one more blowout at home? Maybe those were the only 2 blowouts at home on national TV with lots of alumni in place. So that was that. The Youngstown State game was 2012. That was worse than this. 13, they just weren't very good. 14, like I mentioned, they lost to Akron at home. That's pretty bad. 15, in 2015, they lost to Notre Dame, and it wasn't really all that close. I think the final score seemed close, but the first half, I think it was similar to this. It was like 21-3 at halftime or something like that. 2016, maybe not any worse ones there, but 2017, the Oklahoma State game was worse than this. 2018, the Penn State game at home was worse than this. 2019, they lost to Miami 16-12. That might have been worse than this. 2020, like I say, there was a Notre Dame game here that was worse than this. 21, they lost to Western Michigan, probably worse than this. 22, they lost to Georgia Tech right after they fired Jeff Collins. That's pretty bad. I'm not making my point here because basically I'm pointing out there's been a bad loss, a bad home loss like every year. I don't think this was the worst game but I mean, Bill, I don't know what games you've been to. So, maybe you've been to other games that I'm not thinking of that were worse or not worse than this. Or maybe you missed all the really bad ones. But either way, Thomas Foster's a super chatter. You didn't put your comment in, though, Thomas. I got to find out what you said because you're a big super chatter, and we really appreciate it. I'm going to scroll through and see if I can find Thomas's comments. As I scroll and look, I mean, I think one big issue today, obviously, Mason Heinchel didn't play well. His worst game as a starter, worse than the Syracuse game. Let me see. Just kind of scrolling through to see if I can find Thomas's super chat. Thomas, if you got, here's Thomas. Thomas says, Chris, Pitt needs to recruit better offensive line talent. Clearly a mismatch against Notre Dame's defense. So, I mean, that's the hard thing. Like, offensive line, quarterbacks, these are probably the two toughest positions, and offensive line is more than one position. But I mean, position group, probably the toughest to evaluate and the toughest to recruit. And I think those two parts of it kind of go hand in hand. I think it's tough to evaluate offensive linemen and quarterbacks, except for the really, really elite guys, tip of the spear type players that are like clear, surefire hits that you're going to like 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 of them are going to be stars. It's hard to evaluate because like for the vast majority, probably 85, 90% of offensive line recruits and quarterback recruits in any given recruiting class, you're projecting those guys. You're assuming that you can guess how they're going to be down the road, or you're kind of looking ahead and sort of, like I say, you're projecting. And that's a tough thing to do. And then with that other 10% or 5% or however many it is that look like that you can tell right from high school, yeah, this guy is going to be a stud. They're really hard to get. They go to the biggest programs, like the true freshmen who start at left tackle and exceed. They go to Alabama. The true freshman quarterbacks who are great, and play really well right off the bat. Like, you're probably not getting those guys. No disrespect to Mason Heinchel, but I mean, he was a guy who was hidden that they had to go find. And even then, I don't think there was anything in his high school career that said, like, yeah, he's definitely going to be able to go 5-1 in his first 6 starts as a true freshman. And so it's tough. Like I can sit here and Tom, you can sit here and we can say Pitt needs to recruit better offensive line talent. They absolutely do. They need to upgrade the offensive line. They need to upgrade the defensive line. But I think that's easier said than done. The transfer portal should help. The transfer portal should make it like give you more opportunities to get those talented, productive, experienced offensive linemen and defensive linemen. But even then, like, those guys are going to the highest bidder. Like, you have to pony up. And, Pitt has made it a priority. They've taken transfer offensive linemen like every year. Last year, they brought in Lyndon Cooper. This year they brought in the 3 guys, Kendall Stanley and Keith Gouvet and Jeff Percy. Percy made his return after being injured and missing a few games. He was back today. Him and Stanley kind of rotated at left tackle. We'll probably dive a little bit deeper into which grouping worked better, if there's any, distinguishable, anything distinguishable there. But I'm trying to think back to like 2023. I'm sure they did bring in transfer offensive line. Like, that's got to be a priority every year. And going into next year, when they're going to lose some of these guys, you know what I mean? Ryan Baer is going to be done. Lyndon Cooper is going to be done. Percy and Gouvet are going to be done. Like, you're going to need to go find transfer offensive linemen. And even if all those guys were coming back, you should go find transfer offensive linemen. Like, you need to be good up front, particularly if you've got a talented quarterback like Pitt does. You need to be good up front. You need to be able to protect him. You need to be able to open running lanes. And they haven't. They haven't been able to. And maybe some of that's scheme, but I think a whole lot of that's the offensive line talent. They need to get better on the O-line. All right, that might be it for the super chatters now. We're going to start reading through all the comments and questions. We'll go through as many as we can. But of course, if you want to make sure we read your comment or answer your question, post it with a super chat and we will definitely get to it. Bearded Viking 724 says, could incompetence from a doofus head coach be considered cause for termination? Narduzzi exposed who he is at his core this week. Pitt is being held back by him. I don't think he exposed anything this week about who he is. Pat Narduzzi's the same guy he's been for the last 11 years. He is. Like that comment on Monday. And I think like one of my few comments about that comment is basically, I think I said on Twitter, I was like, are we really still like surprised by this, that he says things that you kind of have to take the spirit of the words more than what the literal words are? And one of the replies to that tweet was like, I think we should be able to expect a, multimillionaire head coach to use his words properly. And you're right. Like, I don't disagree. But Pat Narduzzi is who he's been since 2015. And I think he's grown and developed in different ways. But I mean, when it comes to speaking publicly, when it comes to addressing the media, like there are times, multiple times every season, multiple times every spring camp or training camp where he says something and you kind of, you have to you understand what he means, even if it didn't really come out probably in the best way, or he didn't necessarily phrase it the best way. And so he didn't expose anything. He made a relevant point in a really poor way. That doesn't have anything to do with anything else, and is also not anything of a change from what he's done and has been for the last 11 years. Pitt Forever says, why on earth did Pat Narduzzi play Desmond Reed? The game meant nothing. A spot in the college football playoff is a once-in-a-generation thing. Oh, well, maybe next generation. We played Desmond Reed, and he played Rasheem Biles and Jeff Percy and everybody else who's been hurt that was available to come back because they wanted to win this game. For all the talk of it didn't mean anything, or I'd gladly lose and all this stuff. No, they didn't want to lose this game. They took this game seriously. They knew what was at stake. I think Pat Narduzzi didn't want to put too much on it. He didn't want his players to press too much or get too hyped up or get too tight about it. But he knew what was at stake. They knew what was at stake. Players and coaches. And anybody who could play was out there playing and wanted to play. Super chat came in here. David Allen says ACC Notre Dame deal should be looked at. Not working for ACC teams playing elite non-conference opponents mid-season. Odd situation. I mean, I think it benefits the ACC more than it benefits Notre Dame. Like, sure, it probably makes Notre Dame scheduling easier to have 6 ACC opponents every year. But like, Notre Dame will never struggle to find opponents. Notre Dame could fill its schedule for the next 50 years without making more than 12 phone calls. Like, it wouldn't be that hard for Notre Dame to fill its schedule. They don't need the ACC, in my view. The ACC, on the other hand, the ACC teams need the Notre Dame games. Look at that crowd today. There's a lot of green in there. But there was even more blue. A lot of blue. Majority blue. Mostly blue. And they were there because it was a big game. They were there because you were playing a big opponent. And look, like, the ACC has to be realistic. That, like, if a team like Pitt or Syracuse or Boston College in the first week of November or second week of November, whatever we are now, they could host Wake Forest or they could host Notre Dame. They could play at Georgia Tech or they could play at Notre Dame. I mean, like, there's not even a question. Like, it's huge for your ticket numbers. It's great exposure to be on TV and get seen. And then it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity like Pitt had today. Any team that was going to play Notre Dame at this point in the season is getting a top 10 opponent, potentially coming to their building. And guess what? You're not getting that with the ACC in most years, not in a year when Clemson stinks. So here you have an opportunity for a signature win, and it's tough. It's not going to be easy to get that win. I mean, a team is in the top 10. If a team is in the top 10 in the second week of November, they're probably pretty good. They've proven it by this point. So you're not going to have an easy go of it. But if you have an opportunity to play a team like that, you take that opportunity because it's huge. It's a chance to make a statement. That whole post-shot rant that I went on about the statement and the opportunity to make a statement, it's because they had Notre Dame on the schedule. If they didn't have Notre Dame on the schedule, and they had filled in their non-conference schedule with another directional Michigan school or something like that, and this week they were playing Wake Forest or somebody, how many people are going to be at the game for Wake Forest? It's just not it's a good deal. Like, you want Notre Dame. You want to be as close to Notre Dame as you can. Because because people are always going to be looking at Notre Dame. And if you're on the field with them, they're going to be looking at you too. For better or for worse. And right now, it wasn't good, right? But the opportunity was there for something good. Joshua Brown is a super chatter, says, Chris, I want your opinion on this. I was in section 136 and a bouncer told me if I stood, I would be kicked out. I could only stand when others did. So, I mean, that's tough. That's tough because on one hand, you should be able to enjoy the game, right? On the other hand, everybody else around you should be able to enjoy the game. Ideally, you'd be in a situation where everybody was standing the whole time. And then you could stand and then it's all good. Like when you go to a concert or something, everybody stands up for the whole concert and it's, everybody's doing the same thing. And so there's no issue. I went to one of the Pirates games in the divisional series against the Cardinals in 2013 or whatever it was. I think it was the game Waka pitched. It stood the entire time. Like we stood the entire time and everybody in that stadium stood the entire time. I don't know what to tell you. I think you should be able to stand, but you can't inhibit the experience of people around you, and so it's tough, because I want you to be able to enjoy the game that you should be able to enjoy the game the way you want to enjoy it, but you can't ruin the experience for other people. You know what I'm saying? So that's a tough one. I hate that you almost got kicked out. Maybe head up to the rotunda, watch for there. But I understand you bought the seats. You want to sit in the seats, particularly section 136. You're close to the field. That's tough, man. Sorry to hear it. On a day where a lot of unfortunate things happen, I'm sorry you had a negative interaction with security as well. Let's see. Pitt Fan H2P says, can't wait to hear what Cade Bell has to say about that offensive performance. Horrendous job by him. Not one adjustment. Look, in all but the most obvious examples, I'm not really good at saying whether somebody adjusted unless it's so clear, a team keeps hitting the same exact play against you, or they keep blitzing from the same exact side, or you keep doing the same exact plays and they don't work. It's hard for me to sit back and say oh, why, they didn't make any adjustments. You might be right. Maybe they didn't adjust anything. Maybe just kept calling the same plays over and over again. I think there were a lot of issues with the offense today. I think the offensive line did not protect very well. I think Mason Heinchel got rattled after he got sacked 3 times on the first 4 drives. And the one drive where he didn't get sacked, he threw a pick 6. So I think Mason Heinchel got rattled. I don't think the offensive line did very well. I think there were dropped passes. Running backs, none of the running backs had more than 5 carries. So I can't really say that Desmond Reed at least caught 6 passes and had 7 targets. Jakarian Turner did not have a pass thrown to him. He had 5 touches for 15 yards. Des Reed had 5 carries for 35 yards. Excuse me, that's Juelz Goff. Des Reed had 5 carries for 12 yards. I can't really, I think there were a lot of issues with the offense today. And maybe offensive adjustments, maybe that was among the list. But I actually made a chart of offensive possessions, how far they got. What was the furthest you got on each drive? First drive, they got to the Notre Dame 37 before they turned it over on downs. Second drive, Pitt 30, and they punted. Third drive, Pitt 44, interception. Fourth drive, Pitt 18, they punted. Fifth drive, Pitt 31, they punted. Sixth drive, they got to the Notre Dame. Let me see. The Notre Dame 6, actually. But that was after they had the Kavir Baines-Marquez interception that took the ball back to the Notre Dame 12. And then their seventh drive of the first half, the furthest they got downfield was the Pitt 4, and they punted. And then the eighth drive, final drive of the first half, they got to the Notre Dame 35, and they tried a field goal, and they missed. In the second half, first drive, they got to the Notre Dame 1, and they turned it over on downs. Second drive, they got to the Pitt 44, and they turned it over on downs. And then the third drive was the Eli Holstein drive. So out of the 10 drives with Mason Heinschel on the field, Pitt had 8 possessions with Heinschel in the first half, 2 with Heinschel in the second half. 10 drives, only 3 of them Pitt drove into Notre Dame territory. Now, maybe that's not fair. Maybe we should cut it down. Instead of saying 10 drives, we should say 9 drives. 9 drives that Pitt started on their own end of the field. So we're not counting when Kavir Baines-Marquez returned an interception to the 12. 9 drives where Pitt started on their own end of the field with Mason Heinschel a quarterback. They drove across midfield 3 times. 3. They got in the red zone with Mason Heinschel twice. Once, and actually they didn't drive into the red zone. That was after the Kavir Baines-Marquez interception. So you go on those 9 possessions that started in Pitt territory with Mason Heinschel, a quarterback. They drove into the red zone 1 time. They got to the 1, and then they ran that little pop pass, not even whatever you want to call it, sweep pass to Kenny Johnson that lost 4 yards. What? You're at the 1-yard line. It's second and goal from the 1. You pound it 3 times, or you pound it one more time, and then or even on second down, you play action bootleg and let Mason Heinschel run it in. What are you doing with this? Like, why are you giving the ball to somebody at the 5-yard line and he can't? Anyway, 9 possessions with Mason Heinschel that started in Pitt territory. 3 of them got across midfield. 1 of them made it to the red zone. It's just ineffective offense because they couldn't move the ball because Notre Dame's defense and defensive line were too good. Some super chatters coming in here. David Allen says the issue with the Notre Dame game is it breaks up the ACC schedule. Yeah, but I don't think that really it's not like you play one team 2 weeks in a row and then you have this Notre Dame break and play that other team 2 weeks in a row again. Like, you're playing different teams every week. You have buys at different points. Like, I don't think it's like if they go to Georgia Tech and lose, it's gonna be like, well, we were out of rhythm. We haven't played against an ACC team in 3 weeks or something like that. I don't think it really like it does break up the ACC schedule. You're right, but I don't see that. I don't see that as a negative. I actually kind of like it, because again, like, getting Notre Dame at this point, think about the opportunity it created for Pitt. This was like the perfect point in the schedule for this game. They're 7-2. They get an off week. They're ranked number 22. Notre Dame's number 9, and they got a chance. They get a chance for this big game. And then 2 more ACC games against ranked opponents on the other side. Like, I liked where this fell. I really did. Ramon Escalante says, can we discuss the strength and conditioning program yet? The laundry list of injuries. Pitt looks woefully underdeveloped physically, not just versus Notre Dame, but versus every opponent. I disagree. I mean, the injuries, we've talked about this a million times. When Cruz Brookins first got hurt, he leapt in the air and landed on his shoulder. Is that a strength and conditioning issue? When Zach Crothers got hurt, his leg bent the wrong way. That's not a strength and conditioning issue. Keith Gouveia has to get carted off. There's nothing that could have been done in the weight room over the summer to prevent Keith Gouveia from having to get carted off after the injury he suffered. There are things that I think strength and conditioning programs can either increase the likelihood of injury or decrease the likelihood of injury, but I don't think that's really been the case all that much this year. And I don't think they've gotten pushed around all that much. I think their offensive line just hasn't been very good for a lot of this season. And they don't get any help. They don't keep tight ends in to block or chip or anything like that. Occasionally the running back will do some pass blocking, but it's it's spread out offense and 5 guys trying to block however many the defense wants to send. And a lot of times those guys aren't up to the task of blocking one-on-one. And a lot of times they get overwhelmed by numbers. So I don't know. I just don't. I don't know if I feel like they look woefully underdeveloped physically. I think they're an undersized team. I'll say that. I think they have a lot of undersized players. But like, I don't know what a strength and conditioning program is going to do for Kyle Lewis or Desmond Reed, or Kavir Baines-Marquez. These guys are who they are. They're built the way they are. And I think they're able to make a lot of plays. But, and even if you want to talk about like the battle in the line of scrimmage, I mean, like, look at Pitt's defensive line. Like, I don't know how much bigger or stronger those guys can really be. They are who they are. And it's been effective a lot this season. They've been able to make a lot of plays this season, but they just faced probably the best offensive line and best defensive line they've seen all year. And you know what? Even like Florida State, they got pushed around there too. That Florida State offensive line drove them back. And it's tough. Like, like sometimes you're going to run into teams that are bigger and stronger and more talented than you. And you have to find ways to deal with that. You have to find ways to adjust to that. Not like in the adjustment thing, that I just ranted about, but like in terms of how you game plan and approach it. And sometimes you come up with better plans and sometimes you don't. John Waffle says, security were probably on Notre Dame's payroll. I heard the Let's Go Irish chants. Why weren't they told to shut up? The whole thing is rigged. Well, I don't think who said that they were told to sit down. Joshua Brown. I don't think he was told not to yell. He was just told to sit down so he doesn't obstruct other people's views. And like, look, there were a lot of Notre Dame people there. There were a lot of Notre Dame fans. You saw it in the parking lots. You saw it walking. You saw it in the game, the patches of green and all that stuff. And they got loud. They got loud. As the Pitt fans filed out, Notre Dame built a big lead. Notre Dame fans cheered for their team. Let's see. Try and get through as many of these as we can. Mailman H2P says, I guess we can kiss Matt Sig goodbye. Kid probably committed to Notre Dame at halftime. So tired of Pitt being outclassed on the national stage and in front of all these alumni. What a shame. Yeah, I was kind of hoping this would be a game where all these people are there. Aaron Donald's there. Tony Dorsett is there. Darrelle Revis is there. There's all this history and all these things. Like I thought maybe this would be the game where they really lived up to it and, met the occasion, but Notre Dame was a bit too much for him. Wayne Bay says, I didn't think Notre Dame would dominate Pitt in all 3 phases, but they did. Pretty obvious they are on a different level. Our lines were completely overmatched. Well, and I don't think like Notre Dame, when they face Ohio State or they face, I know Texas A&M escaped today, but if Notre Dame faces some of these top teams in the country, like I'd be interested to see about Notre Dame, Indiana, but Notre Dame, A&M, Alabama, they lost today, but I mean, Alabama or Oklahoma, Texas Tech, some of these other top 10 teams, like I think Notre Dame has, really good lines. They obviously have a great running back, really good receiver, good tight end. I don't know if they are good enough to win the national championship, but they're clearly on a different level from Pitt, which is what you were saying. They were on a different level from Pitt, which is what today, like, I don't think we were going to come out of today saying Pitt's a national championship contender, but we could have come out of today saying Pitt absolutely belongs in the at-large conversation. And clearly they showed that they don't. Lauren, the Hot Rod says, the Clearview Credit Federal Union Junior Panther Shuffle is becoming a real problem. Please comment on this, as this is the absolute biggest problem with Pitt at this time. Yeah, sometimes you get guys that are all style, no substance, and I feel like the young man who was doing the Junior Panther Shuffle today, I mean, it was great that he yelled out, let's go Pitt, or P-I-T-T, let's go Pitt, or whatever he yelled. But I feel like he was more in it for the getting the crowd raved up and didn't really pay attention as during the Junior Panther Shuffle. And it seemed like most of the crowd knew he should have picked 3, but he picked 2. So, look, there's no accounting for who they choose to go down there. I would say, Lauren, you should volunteer your services. David Allen says, in terms of playing Des Reed, he was the only playmaker we had. Without him, the game is even more embarrassing. At a certain point, guys got to get out there. Of note, was furious he was in the game late versus NC State. Yep. I mostly agree with you. I mean, Des Reed, if he's healthy, you play him. You know what I mean? You got to play him. I think Jakarian Turner can make a lot of plays, but like Desmond Reed showed today what he can do. He's a special guy. David Allen also says nothing much for the coaches to do today. Notre Dame is an elite level team talent-wise. This was a roster problem. I'm sure the coaches would love most Notre Dame players and tried to recruit them. Probably. Yeah, probably. Benjamin Glazer says, Chris, that felt and looked like a MAC team playing Notre Dame. Slower, smaller, and weaker. That being said, the defense did well enough to win. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, the defense gave up 4 touchdowns. 2 rushing, 2 passing. They gave up 387 yards, 175 rushing yards. But Notre Dame was only 4 of 12 on third down. They were 3 of 5 on fourth down. Averaged a little less than 6 yards per play. They had a huge time of possession difference. Yeah, I thought the defense was okay. They did get, but they got pushed. They got pushed around. And I think Notre Dame could probably possess the ball as long as they wanted on any of their drives, just with, pushing Pitt back and kind of dominating the line of scrimmage. And that's what they were able to do. And that's, like, there's only so much you can do about that, defensively real quick, just to kind of look at a few numbers here. Rasheem Biles had a game high 9 tackles. Kavir Baines-Marquez had 8. Biles had 2 tackles for loss, the pick 6, a pass breakup, half a sack. Baines-Marquez had an interception, a nice long return. Braylon Lovelace and Rashad Battle had 6 tackles. One guy who's kind of down the list, Kyle Lewis, only had 4 tackles in this game. 1 tackle for loss, kind of quiet game for him. Yeah, I mean, I thought the defense was fine. They had 7 tackles for loss. They had 1 sack. Not really, 2 interceptions. That's solid. Seemed like a chance at a fumble, maybe. But they were okay. It's just, Pitt's offense just did nothing. And Pitt's defense was on the field for a long time in this game. Kevin Plaucha posted this a half hour before we started. I'm here to say that everyone will 100% overreact to this, and half of these comments will be useless and insignificant. Look, Kevin, this is a post-game show. Everything we say here is an overreaction. This is what we do on a post-game show. We overreact to things, and we will absolutely overreact to this game, just like we absolutely overreacted to the Florida State game. And next week after the Georgia Tech game, we will absolutely overreact to that. And hey, the Georgia Tech game next week, we'll be live pretty much as soon as that thing ends. Jim is going to cover that game in Atlanta for us. We will be here at the home studios, the Panther-Lair.com home offices, and we will we'll be live pretty much right after. Not like today where we waited like 3 hours after the game. So we got that to look forward to. We'll overreact to that one too, because that's what we do. That's the fun of it. Evan D says, whatever Pat Narduzzi's messaging was today, whether it was this isn't a must win or play with no pressure or let's kick their butts, it didn't work at all. Yeah. I don't know how much the messaging played a factor in Notre Dame dominating the line of scrimmage, but something didn't work. Kevin Plaucha says Mason Heichel was bad, but he got 0 help from a bad offensive line and drops from receivers when he hit them in the hands. Yeah. Can't. And even like, I think the biggest, was it Pitt's longest play? 27-yard pass to Desmond Reed. Yeah, that one, the play that he got hurt on, 27-yard pass. Most of it happening after the catch. Like even that pass was like kind of thrown behind him, but he at least caught it and ran with it. Ryan Falcone says Desmond Reed would have been a great kick return, punt return, third down package guy. It's too bad, really. He was fun to watch, but he literally never finished a single game against a power opponent that I can recall. Florida State, did he finish that game? I don't remember. Who could say? Evan D says Heinzel and the offensive playmakers needed to make plays for this to be a Pitt win, and Mason Heinzel was bad. Kenny Johnson had one catch. Raphael Williams and Blue Hicks with some bad drops. Recipe for disaster, not much to it. Kenny Johnson had 4 catches for 27 yards. Let's scroll through here. Mark Shilaju says Notre Dame was better, and I don't have a problem with that. What bothers me is our offensive coordinator chose to focus on a deep vertical passing game without making adjustments to Pitt's pass blocking. Pitt needed to focus on a short passing and screen game to slow the Irish pass rush. If I can sit on my couch and see that, Bell should as well. There were options open underneath. There were check down options out there. I don't know if they just needed to emphasize those more in the play calling and in conversations with Mason Heinzel. But I mean, I felt like every time I saw him take a sack or make a bad throw downfield, there was somebody else kind of right in front of him or in the flat. Look, I think if Desmond Reed is out there, okay, and you're the Pitt quarterback, you're Mason Heinzel, when you drop back, you have your first read. And in the back of your mind, you know where Desmond Reed is at all times, right? So if you know he's going to the right flat, you know he's going to the right flat. You know he's in the left, he's in the left, he's in the middle, he's in the middle. So when you drop back, if your first read, if you don't like what your first read is, you try to find where Des Reed is. If you don't like your first read, look for Des Reed. You like that? That's good, I think. I might have to remember that one. I'm not going to remember that one, but you guys should remember that. But seriously, if you don't like that first option, find Desmond Reed and check it down to him. Because chances are you'll get a good play out of it. That's what happens a lot, is they get good plays out of checkdowns to Desmond Reed. It's a great, and a lot of times, I mean, like Notre Dame left that stuff open underneath. Take it for 4 yards. And you'll chip away. And either Cade Bell needs to call that kind of stuff more, or he needs to emphasize that point with Mason Heinzel more, but it needs to happen. Let's see. Travis Spagnolo says everybody forgets that Notre Dame played for a championship last year. They've beaten nearly everyone like that this year. Pitt isn't remotely close to what they have. They have dudes at every position. Pitt used to play these top-end teams very tough, but there's such separation now between teams like Pitt and everyone else. That's why they get boat raced in these types of games. Yeah, might be right. Just kind of scroll through here, get a few more before we jump out. Anthony Popovsky says, just a case of one team being better, bigger, faster, stronger, bullied the trenches, prevented sacks, and got to Pitt's quarterback. Receivers and tight ends drop some beautifully thrown balls. Can't have that. Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. You have such a small margin for error. You just don't have that kind of wiggle room to make those mistakes, to drop passes, to throw interceptions. Like you don't have it when you play in a game like this. And these next 2 games, you're not going to have that kind of wiggle room either. I'm not saying you need to be perfect. You don't need. I don't think it's healthy or productive to go into a game thinking we need to be perfect, but you can't make those mistakes. You don't have that kind of you don't have enough of a talent advantage to get away with those kind of errors. Michael Balsaric says Notre Dame's talent and size were too much for Pitt, plus can't make so many mental mistakes. Yep, exactly. Marlon Barnes Truther says, not saying it would change much, but man, we needed that Raphael Williams catch. Yeah, it was right there. It was right there. And maybe they score there. Maybe it changes the game. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But it's kind of all downhill from there. L. Williamson says we were unprepared after 2 weeks off. Procedure penalties, bad protection calls, and Cade Bell needs to do better. Yeah, I don't know about unprepared. I don't I can't speak to Pitt's preparation. I don't know how prepared they were, and I don't know what came through there. Procedure penalties, that was bad. I'm not sure about the one where it said 2 guys were in motion. I don't think anybody was moving except Desmond Reed, but whatever. It doesn't matter. Justin Bozeman says you can't win. You have a gimmick offense against teams with real athletes. I don't know if I think of Pitt's offense as being a gimmick offense, but whatever you say. Mark Shillaju says, I think Kyle Lewis should stay in college another year. He really struggled today. Also, where was Sean Fitzsimmons today? Sean Fitzsimmons was up in the press box with us. Not in the press box, but up on that press box level, sitting in the coach's box. Kind of worried that Sean Fitzsimmons might be out for a little while. Rusty Shackelford says the frustration for the fans is that we're always the team with the lack of talent, so we were never able to take the next step forward as a program. Against the top teams, maybe. But, it was like 2018, they got crushed by Clemson in the ACC championship game. 2020, they got crushed by Clemson in the regular season. Once Trevor Lawrence was gone, they beat Clemson in 21. So I don't know. It's a cycle. But I think like Pitt, like are they always be? I think you just have to think about where Pitt is in college football, right? Like they're not in that upper tier. They're not. They're in that middle tier somewhere. And it's just a question. And like the vast majority of college football is in that middle tier. There's a handful of programs that are in that top tier, a handful of programs that are at the bottom. Pitt is somewhere in that middle, along with like most other teams. And it's just a question of figuring out, are you in the middle? Are you in the middle top? Are you in the middle bottom? And they kind of hover around there. And some years they're down in the bottom of that middle tier. Some years they're in the middle, and some years they're in the top of that middle tier. And a game like this is a chance to show that you're either top of the middle tier or even up into that next tier. And they show that they're not. They're still somewhere in that middle tier. These next two games, I think the last 5 games have showed that they're not in the bottom of that middle tier of college football. And these next 2 games will show if they can be closer to the upper part of that middle tier. Dave Renak says, Pitt 0-1, Penn State 1-0. You really want to talk about that? You really want to talk about Penn State, how they've done this season? You really want to talk about Penn State against top 10 teams? Get out of here, man. I appreciate you watching I appreciate you watching the stream, though. John Christovich says, Pat Narduzzi didn't take this game seriously. I don't believe you. Will Z says there was a chance after the first interception. I don't know if there was. I don't know if there was. I mean, they would have needed to score on that next drive, I think, to sort of keep in it, and they didn't. They went 3 and out. They forced the 3 and out. They punted. They got a huge interception and couldn't even cash that one in. I think it felt like that game was done. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Will Z clarifies after the first Notre Dame interception. So, yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. First Notre Dame interception is 14-0. You get an interception return to the 12. You cash in there. It's 14-7. Maybe there is still a chance. But even you, Will Z, I think you would probably guess. I think you would probably agree that when that pick 6 was thrown, you were thinking, that's it. It's over. JSR 862 says, I'm at home now. It doesn't even feel like I went to a football game. After that pick 6 and then the following showing on offense, I just seemed to zone out completely. Yeah, I just sort of accepted it at that point. Adam Vitchik says the DBs locked down the wide receivers. That was one of the biggest issues. Spend on the O-line and wide receivers that can separate. But they had some guys open. Not all day. And you're not going to get guys open all day. You're going to have, your opportunities are going to be few and far between. So you have to capitalize when those opportunities come. You can't drop passes. And you have open receivers, you need to hit them. You can't put it in the dirt. You got to hit them on the hands and they have to catch the ball. And so could they have an upgraded wide receiver? Sure. Do they need an upgraded offensive line? Yes. Marlon Barnes Truther says, felt the defense played solid, but when the offense isn't moving the ball, the time of possession goes to them. Yeah, it's true. Let's see. BGH Blitz says Pitt did not represent well at all. It was Notre Dame fans everywhere. Are you being serious? No. Not serious at all. Not one bit. No. I thought Pitt fans showed up for this. Yeah, there were a lot of Notre Dame fans. There's always a lot of Notre Dame fans. I think anywhere Notre Dame plays, there are going to be a lot of Notre Dame fans there. But Pitt fans came out for this game. Let's see. JSR 862 says, I made a sarcastic comment about here at Pitt, we go after conference championships. When was the last time Notre Dame won a conference? And I literally got hate DMs by Notre Dame fans. Look, you can what was it? Oh, about hating Notre Dame fans. Like, we could say a lot about Notre Dame fans, and I think we have said a lot about Notre Dame fans, and will say a lot about Notre Dame fans. But the reality is, like, I was driving out of the stadium today. It was probably 5 or 5:30, somewhere around there. And I'm walking to my car in the garage, and I'm driving away, driving past parking lots and stuff, and like, Notre Dame fans were still out tailgating. And I know it's easier to do after a win, but like, Notre Dame, and there were some Pitt fans still out there too, but Notre Dame fans, they know how to college football. Like, they know how to do it. It is an event, and it's a whole day event. And I remember this, like, what Penn State game did I go to? Maybe either 2017 or 2019. I forget which one. And I was walking out to my car, walking through the parking lots, and this is hours after the game ended, and fans are sitting there with their RVs. They're eating dinner. They're watching the night games, and like, they are in it for a full day. It is a full event. And, and Notre Dame fans were even doing that on the road today. More so than Pitt. Now, maybe if Pitt had won, maybe Pitt fans would be still hanging out, but kind of feel like Pitt fans kind of clear out. Notre Dame fans, they know how to college football. They really do. All right, let's see if I have any super chatters here. A couple here. John Waffle says Pitt should have been 9-0 coming in. Yeah, they should have beat West Virginia and Louisville. No question about it. But they didn't. Chevy Troutman says 0 of 13 on third downs is good, right? 0 separation. I know. That's one of the worst stats in the game. It was 0 of 13 on third down. 2 of 5 on fourth, 0 of 13 on third down. There's a lot of bad stats in this game. That's certainly one of them. 0 of 13 on third down. It was a bad game. Pitt got outclassed, out-talented, outplayed, out-coached, out-everything, and they lost by 22 points. Really could have lost by 28 if not for a literal last-second touchdown pass from Eli Holstein to Malachi Thomas. And now Pitt 7-3, and they're going into their final 2 ACC games. Still opportunity out there to get to the ACC championship game, and it starts next Saturday at Georgia Tech. It's a game Pitt can win, but it's not going to be easy. They're going to have to play well. They're going to have to play better than they played this week, obviously. They're going to have to play better than they played against Stanford. They're going to have to play better than they played against Syracuse. And obviously, they're going to have to play better than they played against Louisville and West Virginia. But that's the next one on the schedule. And it's not over yet. The season's not over. Mason Heinschel has a lot to learn as a true freshman quarterback. And I think there'll be some important lessons to take from this one. But whatever happens, I know we will keep talking about it on Panther-Lair.com and right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll have morning Pitt episodes for you all week long. Of course, Pitt basketball Monday night against Bucknell, the revenge game. First non-conference loss in the Peterson Event Center came at the hands of Bucknell, and the Bison are coming back for the first time since then. So no one even thinks about that game in those terms. Nobody at Bucknell knows about it or cares about it. I doubt anybody is still left at Pitt who was around at that time. So it's not going to be a major storyline except for me pushing it. But either way, we'll be talking Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt everything all week long leading into Pitt, Georgia Tech. So make sure you stay tuned at Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight for the live stream. We appreciate it. It's fun as always. Only 2 more of these plus a bowl game. So 3 more of these post-game shows that we have this season. Where did the time go? It's been flying by. All right, make sure you like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks for tuning in today. Pitt loses, but at least we could all get together and hang out and talk about it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay tuned to Panther-Lair.com, and we will catch up with you Monday morning for The Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.